The bass was so loud it rattled the glasses behind the bar. Neon lights cut through the smoke, flashing red and blue across the packed nightclub. It was the kind of place where people came to be seen, to be loud, to forget consequences for a few hours. And then the bikers walked in, 5 of them, leather jackets heavy with patches, steel chains hanging from belts, boots hitting the floor in slow, deliberate steps. Their laughter sliced through the music, sharp and confident. Heads turned instantly. Everyone in the club knew them. Not because they were famous, but because they were feared. Near the bar, slightly away from the chaos, an older man sat alone. No crew, no security, no spotlight. Just a dark jacket, simple jeans, and a calm stillness that didn't belong in a place like this. One biker noticed him and nudged the others. "Look at this," he said, smirking. "Did someone's uncle get lost?" They surrounded the table, blocking the lights. One leaned in close enough for his breath to carry the smell of alcohol. "Hey, old man," he laughed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You waiting for your babysitter?" Laughter exploded around them. The man didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't even look up. That only made it worse. Another biker grabbed the chair beside him and kicked it back. "You deaf too? Or just scared?" People nearby froze. Some pulled out their phones. Others turned away, pretending not to see. The bouncers watched from a distance, unsure, unwilling to step in. Everyone expected shouting, begging, fear. Instead, the man slowly raised his eyes. They were calm, clear, unbothered. Steven Seagal. He didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't explain who he was. He simply looked at the biker in front of him and said quietly, "You should walk away." For a split second, something shifted. The laughter faded. The air felt heavier. Then the biker laughed even louder. "Or what?" he said. "You gonna lecture us?" Steven remained seated, still calm, still silent. What they didn't know, what no one in that nightclub understood yet, was that they weren't humiliating an old man. They were testing someone who had ended fights before they ever started, and the next few seconds would change everything. The moment stretched thin and fragile like a glass about to shatter. The lead biker stepped even closer, invading Steven's space on purpose. His chest brushed against Steven's jacket as he leaned in, smiling with the confidence of a man who had never been challenged in this room. "What's wrong?" the biker said loudly. "Cat got your tongue." Steven didn't answer. He could feel the eyes of the crowd pressing in from every direction. He could hear the soft hum of phones recording, the uneasy shifting of people who knew this was about to turn ugly. He noticed the exits, the distance to the bar, the positions of the bikers without moving his head. Old habits never left him. Another biker circled behind him. "Bet he's scared," one of them laughed. "Look at him shaking." Steven wasn't shaking. He was breathing, slow, controlled, measured. The lead biker suddenly shoved him harder this time. A sharp push meant to provoke a reaction. Steven took a single step back, steadying himself without effort. The biker mistook that step for weakness. "There it is," the biker said. "You should have walked away when we told you." Steven finally spoke. "This is your last warning." His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it cut through the noise like a blade. A few people in the crowd felt it, that quiet certainty that didn't need volume. The biker laughed again, but it sounded forced now. "You hear this guy?" he said to his friends. "He thinks he's in a movie." Then it happened. Without any signal, without a dramatic wind-up, the biker swung. It wasn't a clean punch. It was wide, angry, fueled by alcohol and ego, to the crowd. It looked fast. To Steven, it looked slow. He shifted to the side, barely moving his feet. His hand rose and met the biker's wrist, not with force but with timing. The momentum of the punch carried itself forward, straight into a lock. There was a sharp gasp. The biker's expression changed instantly, confidence melting into confusion, then pain. His arm twisted in a way it wasn't meant to. Steven stepped in close, his voice low so only the biker could hear. "I tried to warn you." With a simple turn of the wrist and a controlled step forward, the biker went down hard. Not thrown, not slammed, guided, straight to the floor. The music stopped. The club fell into a stunned silence broken only by the biker's groan. For half a second, no one moved. Then chaos tried to rush in. "Get him!" someone shouted. Two bikers lunged at once. Stephen moved before they reached him. One grabbed for his shoulder. Stephen rotated, slipping the grip and redirecting the arm downward. A sharp twist. A step. The biker stumbled forward and crashed into a table, glasses shattering. The second swung wildly. Stephen closed the distance, neutralizing the strike before it finished. A short movement. A controlled push to the chest. The biker lost his balance and hit the floor beside his friend. No punches, no kicks, no rage. Just precision. People in the crowd backed away instinctively, realizing this wasn't a bar fight. This was something else, something disciplined, something dangerous in its calmness. The remaining bikers froze. They had expected shouting, chaos. A messy brawl they knew how to win. Instead, they were facing a man who hadn't broken a sweat. Stephen stood in the center of the small clearing, breathing evenly. His jacket was still straight, his expression unchanged. "Enough," he said. The word wasn't loud, but it carried. The bikers hesitated. Pride screamed at them to continue. Fear told them to stop. One biker glanced at his friend on the floor, clutching his arm, face pale. Another looked at the shattered table, then back at Stephen. They were starting to understand. This wasn't luck. This wasn't aggression. This was control. Security finally rushed in, but they slowed as they approached, unsure of what they were walking into. The manager stood frozen behind the bar, eyes wide. Stephen didn't advance, didn't chase, didn't threaten. He simply waited. The bikers had tried to humiliate him. Instead, they had exposed themselves. And the room knew it. For a moment, no one knew what to do. The music was off. The lights seemed brighter without it. Harsh and revealing. Smoke hung in the air. Unmoving, as if even it was afraid to drift. Every eye in the nightclub was locked onto the small circle in the center of the floor where three bikers lay groaning, and Steven Seagal stood quietly among broken glass and overturned chairs. Phones were still raised, but no one spoke. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. A couple backed toward the wall, afraid to turn their backs on the scene. The DJ stared at his console, frozen, unsure whether to restart the music or wait. Stephen looked around calmly, not to intimidate anyone, but to understand the room. Years of experience had taught him that the aftermath was often more dangerous than the conflict itself. Adrenaline made people unpredictable. One of the bikers tried to stand. He pushed himself up with one hand, wincing, his injured arm hanging uselessly at his side. Pride burned in his eyes, but pain held him back. He looked at Stephen, not with anger anymore, but with disbelief. Who are you?" he muttered. Stephen didn't answer immediately. Security finally stepped closer, forming a loose line between Stephen and the bikers. Their faces showed uncertainty rather than authority. They weren't sure who they were supposed to control. The club manager rushed forward, his voice shaking. "Everyone, just calm down," he said, forcing a smile that fooled no one. Stephen raised one hand slightly. The gesture was small, but it stopped the manager mid-sentence. "I'm fine," Stephen said. "They'll be fine too, if they stay still." The manager swallowed hard and nodded. The bikers' friends dragged them a few feet back, creating distance. No one wanted to test Stephen again. The energy had shifted completely. Where arrogance once ruled, hesitation now took its place. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Did you see that? He didn't even hit them." That wasn't normal. A bartender leaned toward another staff member. "Is that really him?" she whispered. "I think so," the other replied. "Steven Seagal." The name moved through the room like electricity. A few people looked closer now, at the face, the posture, the unmistakable calm. Recognition spread. Some gasped softly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. One biker heard the name and laughed weakly, still on the floor. "No way," he said. "You're kidding." Stephen finally spoke again, his voice steady. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "You forced it." His words weren't accusatory. They were factual. The lead biker, the one who had started it all, sat slumped against a chair, sweat beading on his forehead. His earlier confidence was gone. He avoided Stephen's eyes now, staring at the floor like a child who had pushed too far. Around them, the crowd slowly exhaled. The tension didn't disappear, but it softened. People realized the danger had passed, not because someone won, but because someone chose not to continue. Stephen turned slightly toward the exit, signaling that he was done. He hadn't humiliated anyone in return. He hadn't demanded apologies. He had nothing to prove. As he took a step, one of the bikers spoke up, his voice unsteady. "Hey." Stephen stopped, but didn't turn. The biker struggled to his feet, with help from his friends. We didn't know," he said quietly. Stephen looked back then. "I know," he replied. "That's why this happened." The words landed harder than any strike. Security opened a path instinctively. The crowd parted without being asked. People who had been shouting and dancing minutes earlier now stood silent, respectful. Stephen walked toward the exit at the same unhurried pace he had walked in. Behind him, the club slowly came back to life. The DJ hesitated, then turned the music on low. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. No one was laughing anymore. The bikers remained where they were, surrounded by broken glass and bruised pride. They had come in looking for dominance. What they were left with was humility, and everyone in that nightclub felt it. Saturday night at Vortex Club was always chaos, but tonight the energy felt sharper, more dangerous. The line outside wrapped around the block, engines from parked motorcycles growled in the distance, and the bass inside thumped like a living heartbeat. Lights flickered across sweating faces, glasses clinked, and laughter rose and fell in waves. Everyone knew this place had two rules: have money, and don't cross the bikers. They weren't official owners, but they might as well have been. For months, they had treated the club like their personal territory. They drank without paying, shoved people out of the way, and decided who stayed and who left. The manager tolerated it because he was afraid. The bouncers tolerated it because they wanted to go home in one piece. Near the bar, away from the dance floor, Steven Seagal sat quietly. He hadn't come for attention. He hadn't come to prove anything. He ordered mineral water instead of alcohol, nodding politely to the bartender who served him without comment. His clothes were plain, a black jacket worn soft with age, dark jeans, no jewelry. To most people, he looked like just another older man trying to relive his youth by visiting a nightclub. But there was something about the way he sat. His back was straight. His movements were minimal. His presence was calm in a way that felt out of place. When the bikers surrounded him, Stephen didn't react because he didn't need to. He had spent decades reading danger, recognizing it before it exploded. To him, their loud voices and exaggerated gestures weren't threatening. They were predictable. The lead biker paced in front of him, boots scraping the floor. "You think this is a library?" he sneered. "This is our spot." Stephen looked up, his expression neutral. "I'm not bothering anyone," he said evenly. The biker laughed and looked around, feeding off the attention. "You hear that? He's not bothering anyone." A few people laughed nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably. The club manager watched from behind the bar, his fingers gripping the counter. He knew this was going too far, but fear kept him silent. Stephen could feel the tension building like pressure in the air. He stood no taller than the men around him, and he knew exactly how that looked to them. Old, slow, harmless. One biker leaned down close to his face. "You don't belong here, old man." Stephen didn't raise his voice. "Everyone belongs somewhere," he replied calmly. That calm irritated them more than insults ever could. The biker shoved his shoulder lightly, testing him. The shove wasn't hard. It wasn't meant to be. It was meant to humiliate. A hush spread through the nearby crowd. Stephen stood up, slowly, not aggressively, not defensively, just enough to meet them eye to eye. People expected anger. They expected shouting. What they got instead was silence. The kind of silence that makes even confident people uneasy. Stephen looked at the biker who had shoved him. "Sit down," he said softly, "before you make a mistake." For a brief moment, the biker hesitated. Something in Stephen's tone didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like certainty, but pride won. The biker smirked. "You gonna cry now?" Another biker stepped closer, cracking his knuckles. Maybe he needs help finding the exit. Around them, phones rose higher. The DJ noticed the tension and lowered the music slightly. The entire club felt like it was holding its breath. Stephen exhaled slowly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't afraid. He was disappointed. "I came here for peace," he said. "You're looking for trouble." The lead biker laughed and spread his arms. "Well, congratulations," he said. "You found it." Stephen said nothing more. He simply shifted his weight, subtle, almost unnoticeable. The bikers mistook that calm for weakness. And that was the moment everything crossed the line. The front doors of the nightclub swung open, letting in a rush of cool night air that cut through the smoke and tension like a blade. Steven Seagal was only a few steps from the exit when a voice called out from behind the bar. "Wait." It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it carried authority. Steven stopped. The club manager hurried forward, adjusting his jacket nervously. Behind him followed two men in tailored suits, completely out of place in a nightclub full of neon lights and leather jackets. Their expressions were serious, focused, the kind usually seen in boardrooms, not bars. One of the suited men looked directly at Stephen, relief clear on his face. "Mr. Seagal," he said, "we've been looking for you." The room froze again. Whispers exploded instantly. "Mr. Seagal? Did he say Seagal? Wait. Like that Seagal?" The biker's head snapped up. The lead biker's face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The suited man stepped closer, ignoring the mess on the floor. "I'm sorry this happened," he continued. "Security outside alerted us. We wanted to make sure you were okay." Stephen nodded calmly. "I'm fine," he said. The manager swallowed hard. "You know him?" he asked, though the answer was already obvious. The second suited man spoke now. "Of course we do. Steven Seagal, international film star, martial arts master, and tonight, our guest." The word master echoed in the room. The bikers exchanged looks, panic replacing confusion. Everything suddenly made sense. The calm, the precision. The way the fight had ended before it began. One biker muttered, barely audible, "We messed up." Stephen turned slowly, facing them again. "This isn't about who I am," he said. "It's about what you chose to do. No anger, no gloating, just truth." The lead biker forced himself to stand, ignoring the pain in his arm. His voice shook. "We thought you were just some guy." Stephen met his eyes. "That's the point." Silence followed. The suited men stepped aside, giving Stephen space. The club manager wiped sweat from his forehead, suddenly realizing how close everything had come to disaster. Not just a fight, but a reputation-ending incident. Around them, people whispered excitedly now, phones buzzing as messages flew out into the night. This wasn't just a bar fight anymore. This was a story people would tell for years. One biker finally lowered his head. "We're sorry," he said quietly. Stephen nodded once. "Learn from it," he replied. That was all. He turned back toward the exit, but the manager rushed forward again. "Mr. Seagal, please," he said. "Let us make this right. Drinks. A private room." Stephen raised his hand gently, stopping him. "No," he said. "Control your space. That's enough." The manager nodded quickly. "Yes, of course." As Stephen walked out, the suited men followed a step behind, but he waved them off. He didn't need an escort. Outside, the roar of motorcycles faded into the distance. Inside, the club slowly returned to motion, but the energy was different now. People danced again, but with less chaos, less arrogance. Back inside, the bikers sat quietly at their table, nursing injuries and something far worse than bruises, their pride. They had tried to humiliate a stranger. They had learned in front of everyone what real power looked like. Not loud, not violent, not cruel, just calm. And the name Steven Seagal would never sound the same to them again. The club didn't feel the same after Steven Seagal left. The music was back on, but it was lower now, almost respectful. Conversations were quieter. People kept glancing toward the door he had walked through, as if expecting him to return, or as if his presence still lingered in the air. At the center table, the bikers sat in silence. A few minutes earlier, they had ruled this place with noise and intimidation. Now they avoided eye contact with everyone around them. One of them had his arm wrapped in a jacket, another pressed ice against his wrist. No one laughed anymore. The lead biker finally spoke, his voice heavy. "We shouldn't have done that." No one argued. Across the room, the manager gathered his staff. His hand still shook slightly as he spoke. "That never happens again," he said firmly. "Anyone causing trouble, I don't care who they are. They're out." The bouncers nodded. For the first time that night, they looked relieved. Stephen, meanwhile, stood outside under the streetlights, the cool air steadying his breath. One of the suited men stepped closer. "You handled that well," the man said. "Most people wouldn't have." Stephen gave a faint smile. "Most people don't have a choice," he replied. The man hesitated. "Do you want us to press charges?" Stephen shook his head. "Number they've already learned." Inside the club, the bikers were paying their tab, in full, for the first time in months. The bartender watched them carefully, surprised by the change. When one biker muttered an apology under his breath, she nodded, unsure what else to do. Back outside, Stephen adjusted his jacket and looked up at the night sky. The suited men waited, sensing he wasn't finished yet. "Places like that," Stephen said, "reflect the people who run them. If arrogance is allowed, it grows." The men nodded. Stephen turned back toward the entrance one last time. Through the glass doors, he could see the bikers sitting quietly, heads low. "They didn't need punishment," he continued. "They needed perspective." A motorcycle engine revved in the distance. Inside, one of the bikers stood up and walked toward the bar. The room tensed for a moment, then relaxed when he spoke calmly. "I'm sorry," he said to the bartender, "for before." She studied him, then nodded. "Just don't let it happen again." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Stephen took a step away from the club, ready to leave the night behind. There was no applause, no crowd following him, just quiet understanding. That was how he preferred it. Power, he believed, wasn't about domination. It was about restraint, knowing what you could do and choosing not to. Inside the club, conversations slowly returned to normal. But something had shifted. People were more aware, more cautious, more human. The bikers left shortly after, walking past the exit without looking up outside. They stood by their motorcycles in silence before one finally spoke. "He didn't even hate us," he said. "No," another replied. "That's worse." They rode off into the night, not in a pack but spaced apart, each lost in his own thoughts. Stephen disappeared down the street, unnoticed by most, remembered by all. The conflict was over, but the lesson had just begun. The night air was quiet as Steven Seagal walked away from the Vortex Club. The neon lights faded behind him, replaced by the dim glow of street lamps and the occasional rumble of a distant motorcycle. No one followed him, no one cheered, no one even spoke, yet the echoes of what had happened inside lingered in the minds of everyone present, louder than any music or shout. Inside the club, the crowd was slowly regaining its composure. Conversations resumed, but with a new caution. People glanced at the bikers who had tried to dominate the room, now silent, humbled, and nursing their pride. They weren't just bruised from Steven's precise, controlled movements. They were bruised in ego, and everyone in the club had witnessed it. The lesson wasn't about pain or punishment. It was about respect, control, and restraint. The lead biker sat alone for a moment, staring at his hands. Pride had ruled him all night, and now it had deserted him. For the first time, he understood that arrogance can blind even the strongest. His friends didn't say a word, and neither did the bartender, the DJ, or the bouncers. They all understood that the events of the evening had rewritten the rules of the room. Outside, Stephen adjusted his jacket, the weight of his presence still lingering in the air. He had not sought confrontation. He had not sought attention, and he had not sought revenge. What he had done was far simpler, and far more effective, than anything the bikers could have imagined. He had reminded everyone that true power does not announce itself. True power waits. It observes. It decides when, where, and how to act. Walking through the empty streets, he reflected silently. Power isn't in noise, dominance, or fear. Power is in the calm, measured choices that leave an impression stronger than any shout. It is in knowing one's ability and choosing not to display it unnecessarily. And perhaps most importantly, it is in giving people the chance to understand the difference between arrogance and respect before lessons are learned the hard way. Back at the club, the staff cleaned up the chaos. Broken glasses were swept, tables rearranged, and the bikers' pride quietly acknowledged in whispered apologies. The club manager, who had witnessed it all, sat down heavily, his mind racing. He realized that leadership was not about controlling through fear. It was about recognizing who really deserves authority, who deserves respect, and who will act responsibly when no one is watching. The bikers eventually left. Their motorcycles roared away into the night, engines echoing against brick walls, but their confidence was no longer the same. They had come in loud and bold, ready to humiliate a stranger. They left with humility, carrying a lesson that would linger far longer than the music that had been playing when the night began. And somewhere down the street, Steven Seagal disappeared into the darkness, quiet, composed, leaving behind a room full of people forever changed by his presence. No celebration, no fanfare, just the truth. Strength is not measured by fear you instill, but by the restraint you practice and the respect you command quietly. For those watching this story unfold, whether in the club, on a screen, or through a retelling, there is a clear message. Arrogance can be loud, impulsive, and fleeting. Respect, however, is earned silently, powerfully, and permanently. True influence doesn't announce itself with noise or aggression. It manifests in moments like this, when calmness and decisiveness turn the tables without a single shout. Type respect if you believe humility is real strength. Share where you're watching from. Your comment matters. Because one lesson is universal. The person you underestimate today may be the one shaping your tomorrow. And when the quiet ones move, the world takes notice.